Jerome, thanks ever so. And as you say, great thanks to Motion Sport, Extra Care Charitable Trust and the Centre for Ageing Better for joining us this afternoon. Just by way of background, if you haven't joined us before, our happy hour sessions are now just over a year old. We've been running them through lockdown, really to enable us to continue our engagement with Housing Linn members. And while many of you will be aware that the Housing Linn sort of champions the happy design principles and works very much in the housing sector in relation to developing new and contemporary housing, we're also really interested about how that property and the properties and the homes of individuals can be adapted for future living as well. So issues around improvements to the home, tackling disrepair, and the links with improved accessibility, both within and outside the home, are something that's very close to the heart of the Housing Linn and our work around creating a much more age-friendly environment. So with that in mind, it's great that we've got three great sessions here, three great presentations here, which are going to look at different aspects of that, both in relation to what we mean by around creating beautiful and affordable homes, from Ed Warner, who I'm sure needs no introduction. He's a long-term supporter of the Linn. Thanks, Motion Spot and Ed, for your support. You also appeared a couple of times on the various platforms, both in person but also virtually. He's going to be joined by Shirley Hall, who again has presented at various Housing Linn events over the last year or so, and she's actually at the moment in one of their schemes, and she's going to talk about the innovation that's taking place in Solihull. And then a really important inquiry that's taking place, the Good Homes Inquiry. And Yvonne and Millie are going to talk about what makes a good home. And again, we've been really pleased to partner with the Centre for Ageing Better around that. So all four of you, in fact, welcome. And rather than hearing me talk, I'm going to pass right over to Ed, because our happy hours are short 75-minute sessions, and I would like you to have the opportunity to showcase what you do so well. So Ed, kick off.
Thanks very much, Jeremy. And hello, everyone. Let me just try and share my screen to bring my presentation up before it starts. Hopefully, you should be able to see that. Okay. Thanks, Jeremy. And really delighted to be supporting Housing Linn's Happy Hour today. I'm particularly pleased to see so many people on the call today, and also registrants who will catch up, I'm sure, with this at a later time. And for me, it really kind of demonstrates the importance of really beautiful, accessible and future-proofed homes, which has very much been, somewhat turbocharged by the COVID pandemic that we've all been through. We've seen a real rise in interest around future-proofing homes, because so many, particularly older, vulnerable people have been isolating for so long over the last 15 months. We've got to make sure the design of these homes are right. I'm going to spend just a few minutes today talking about the importance of embedding really good accessible design principles at the start of the design process. I'm also going to give you some insight into some of the innovative products that are possible to specify and supply into homes to make them really beautiful, future-proofed, as well as accessible for our ageing population. Apologies to anyone that has seen me speak before, but I know there are a number of new people to the Linn on this happy hour, and I just wanted to give a very brief introduction to me and the business, and give you an idea why I'm so passionate about this sector. I started the accessible design business Motion Spot in 2012 after the personal experience of our co-founder, an old school friend of mine, James Taylor, pictured here on the left, who sadly experienced a spinal cord injury in a diving accident aged 25. He spent 8 months in Stoke Mandeville Hospital and returned to his flat in Battersea as a wheelchair user. His flat in Battersea looked very similar to this, but when an occupational therapist came around and kitted out his home, this is the type of designs and products they put forward to him. Not knowing anything different, he installed a lot of what you saw on the bottom row, and it was something he said to me in 2011 that still very much resonates with me and the team today. And he said, every morning I wake up and I'm reminded of my condition because the product's around me. And I'm a big believer that if you get the environment right for people, you can really positively impact cognitive and physical health. So I decided to leave what I was doing, set up Motion Spot, and 9 years later, we've built a really talented team who have done an amazing job focusing on on working with clients to ensure that homes are as accessible as possible, and that we move the product mix on from what you see on that bottom row. And the reason for our success over the last 9 years has been because of our passion around the evidence-based research and design ethos, which is very much at the center of our business. So we believe that good design can only happen by taking kind of global best practice and academic research and legislation and guidelines, and pairing that with our own designers' knowledge and experience of what works. But really importantly, you've got to speak to the people who are using these spaces to ensure that we're designing appropriate homes for people for life. And you know, what we do at the very early stage working with clients is to get them thinking about who they're actually designing these spaces for, which seems a very obvious thing to say, but it's amazing how many schemes, you know, we've all been into over the years, and they really haven't been designed to suit people as they get older. And there are a multitude of reasons behind that, but one of the big ones is the lack of building regulation that's out there. There isn't really anything in building regulations that helps designers to really design accessible and future-proofed homes for later living. And you know, operators are either designing to Category 3 wheelchair standards, or they're designing to Category 2. But in reality, only 8% of people in the UK with a disability are in a wheelchair. So, you know, those Category 3 homes aren't always occupied by people in wheelchairs, and so often the Category 2 homes are actually required by someone who develops a condition that means they're in a wheelchair at a later date. So we very much encourage our clients to think about how they can design to suit a range of physical, cognitive and sensory impairments, as well as neurodiversity, and design for conditions like arthritis and dementia and Parkinson's, so that we're not just thinking about it as Category 3 and Category 2 housing. And I always love the icons on the right-hand side. These are produced by Microsoft, and they basically say that at any time in our day, week, or month or life, we will experience a situational, temporary or permanent disability. And actually, by designing right from the outset, by embedding accessible design principles into your designs, you're just designing better for everybody. You're not just designing for a particular group of people. And a big part of what we do on our projects, and Shirley will come on to talk about this as part of the work with the Extracare Charitable Trust, is really help clients thinking about how they can build an accessible design strategy or blueprint for their development or future developments. What we found is architects are amazingly good at designing the master plan of the scheme and the look and feel of the buildings, and obviously how the space interrelates within a building. But actually, when it gets into the granular detail of what exactly goes into an apartment, particularly in bathrooms and kitchens, but also what impact can changes in materiality, color, what do good design principles around acoustics and lighting look like? We're big believers in what we call 2-for-1 design features. So the concept that actually you can design a really beautiful future-proofed home, but actually you wouldn't know you're in a future-proofed home until you needed the access features around it. And a big part of what we very much promote, not just with our clients, but across industry, is the concept of personalization. We believe that homes should be as adaptable and flexible as possible, but ultimately everyone's home is their own personal home. And we've got to create spaces that people can adapt to suit their needs as they get older, whether that's adaptations or aesthetic changes that they want to make. So for us, personalization is key, and thinking about that blueprint throughout the design process is really important. I'm just going to pick out some examples of how these principles have come to life within a client, and I'm really delighted that Shirley's going to be talking about the innovation show apartment at Solihull. So I'm not going to share too much detail or give too many spoilers away around Shirley's presentation, but the Extracare Charitable Trust engaged Motion Spot about 12 months ago now, in fact longer than that, I'm losing all time with COVID, about 16 months ago, to look at how we could set this blueprint for their schemes and improve the design of apartments and soon to be communal areas to better suit residents in their schemes. And that work very much started with focus group activity within the villages. This was just before March the 23rd last year. But we got some amazing feedback from residents in Village, and our design team went out into a number of locations. And some of the challenges that were identified were some of the problems in the kitchens around storage space, the heights of cupboards. There's quite a lot of unused space in lots of kitchens for later living, simply because people can't reach it. We had endless debates around the position of the fridge, freezer, and how much space you give to fridge versus freezer. There were some problems associated with contrast in the kitchen. So you can see that top right-hand image, the contrast of the kitchen units versus the floor made it very difficult for someone with visual impairment to identify exactly where the kitchen units were. And also just the general usability of appliances within the kitchen. So how easy was it to turn on the hob? Could actually someone see the hob controls? How easy was it to operate that extractor? Were just some of the challenges that came out in kitchens. And in bathrooms, whilst the space actually in Extracare Charitable Trust bathrooms are really good, some of the issues experienced were around the height of the toilet, the type of flush plate used required real dexterity and force to operate. Storage comes up time and time again on later living schemes. So many people design bathrooms that look great from the outset, but if you go back into them 6 months later, they'll often look like this, either full of adaptations that have had to be put in, or full of products that actually you or I wouldn't want on show if we had guests coming to stay with us or use our bathroom at any given time. So just thinking about how you plan storage is really important within a bathroom. So that work progressed with the Extracare Charitable Trust, and what we sort of moved through with them was a bit of a stage of design of every element of the apartment. But an important part of that was putting forward innovative products that could go into all of their new builds as well as their innovation show apartment. And I just wanted to spend a few minutes just running through some of those products and design principles. When designing accessible bathrooms, some of the principles that we put into Extracare were things like the dual design feature, like the riser rail, which supports the shower head in place, but supports up to 150 kilograms of weight, doubling as a grab rail within that shower area. Looking at the position and height of a toilet so that it is easier to get down and get off the toilet, but also easier to transfer from a wheelchair. Thinking about the type of flush plate, making sure that's really easy to operate with a clenched fist or elbow. And a big bugbear for us on later living and Extracare schemes is trying to get away from the sort of clinical looking shower curtain. So we designed in what looks like a fixed pane of glass, but actually can bifold back to the wall when not in use, fully opening up the turning space within that room, and just creating the flexibility that if someone was a wheelchair user, they're able to get more maneuverability within the room. The concept of sort of adaptability and flexibility, it was key, particularly with Shirley and the Solihull development. And one of the things we see on a lot of schemes is a number of grab rails and shower seats installed from the outset into developments, and often developers just put them in as standard. But as you'll see residents using those spaces, not everyone needs grab rails and shower seats, and they can just look very very clinical within a space. And what we wanted to do is remove grab rails from the outset, but actually just plan for their future provisions. So this is some technology that we've actually brought across from our hospitality side of the business. You can see cover plates on the left-hand side that in 5 minutes you can you can totally change that into a fully adapted bathroom with grab rails and shower seats that can just be hooked onto those cover plates. And what that means is if someone is then moving on from the apartment, the operator is able just to reinstall the cover plates and be able to personalize it to the next resident's needs at any time. And again, that concept of flexibility has been carried through for items like tracking hoist systems. Again, traditionally very clinical looking systems, particularly within Extracare schemes. I'm sure many of you have got mobile hoists on schemes, and I'm sure some of you have got ceiling track hoists, but the ceiling track hoists often are a very chunky looking bits of kit that are attached to the ceiling and are very visible at all times. This is actually a hotel room in Manchester we finished just before lockdown last year, called Hotel Brooklyn in Manchester, which shows that we can recess a ceiling track hoist into the soffit of a ceiling, actually disguise that track as a lighting detail in the ceiling, and then disguise the motor within a bit of joinery. Again, it gives the access and flexibility when someone needs it, but actually it means that everything is hidden away when not in use, just making it feel and function much more like a home than more of a care scheme. Again, some of the sort of principles that we've embedded into Extracare around kitchens are simple things like ensuring that everyday items are on show on a regular basis. So a number of schemes I've been into, and the residents very kindly offered to make me a cup of tea, and I've watched them going into every single cupboard trying to remember where the tea bags and the mugs are. Having those everyday items on show is a really important accessible design principle, as are the position and type of appliances that are specified. So we love the hide and slide Neff ovens on schemes. We understand they come at a cost, and there are other appliances that can deliver similar levels of access at a lower price point. Other types of principles include getting the lighting levels right in kitchens, particularly around task lighting, but also looking at the functionality of the extractor. So having an extractor that comes on automatically when you turn on the hob, as opposed to having to go through that reaching movement, which can be so difficult for people above a certain age or who have developed a condition like arthritis in the shoulder. Also thinking about storage options. So the pictures on the right are just good examples of just good design. So I would love a pull-out larder in my kitchen at home, rather than having to just reach into the back of the cupboard to access things. The same as, you know, if I was shorter in stature, or if I was in a wheelchair, actually having the ability to have a drop-down basket that pulls the contents of that cupboard down towards you is a really sort of favourable design feature. I'm conscious of time, and I'm going to wrap up in a second, but I just wanted to identify a couple of areas that often fall below design standards within later living and extra care schemes within communal areas. One of those areas is the wheelchair accessible toilet, which every scheme should have at least one of. Unfortunately, majority of them look like this, and that's because they're very much a design afterthought on the scheme. We're big believers that any accessible area should look and feel exactly the same as any other parts of your building. And this is exactly the same design, using a very different, is exactly the same room, in fact, using just a very different set of materials and finishes. I'm not saying that your later living and extra care scheme has to go down the route of marble walls. And in fact, we would be saying that highly glossed marble probably isn't the right option anyway, particularly for someone with a cognitive or visual impairment. But this was in a hotel in London that demonstrates what you can do just by thinking about the right design principles and products at the right stage. This last image hasn't come out as bright as we'd hoped. It's a bit dark as an image, but again, an area of extra care schemes that is so traditionally neglected is the assisted bathroom, which I can't tell you the number of schemes I've been to where you have the 100 by 100 white tiles with the very medical looking bath plonked in the middle of the room. Again, with a bit of a design thought at the right stage and the right product selection at the right stage, you can deliver a scheme that is in keeping with the rest of the building, which very much looked and felt like this, but just resembles a bit more like a home or spa experience as opposed to being an assisted bathroom. So just in conclusion, really, I just wanted to draw on a bit of a summary and highlight the importance of embedding accessible design at the very early stages of a design process. I'd really urge you to think about engaging the right design team at an early enough stage to conduct just general reviews of the scheme plans and make recommendations to help improve access and give you such an advantage to raise the bar far and away beyond what minimum guidelines and regulations are stipulating to help really design a scheme that works for everybody. We know the advantage, and Shirley will tell you a bit more about the advantage of having an accessible design strategy in place that becomes a blueprint for this scheme and other schemes that you're building, and getting the right product specification right, but importantly making sure that access can be monitored throughout the design process. We see so many schemes changed as contractors get on site and say, I'm going to swap this out for that, and they don't really necessarily understand why it's been designed from the outset. And just thinking about staff training as well, to make sure that staff are aware of the design principles that have gone into the scheme from the very early stage. Last 2 slides from me, because I know cost will be mentioned in Q&A. I just wanted to highlight that at the very early stage and say that if accessible design and product specification is thought about at the right stage of a project, you do not need to see significant on cost to your budget to build out some of the design features that I've been showing today. And the way of doing that is actually putting together the right product packages and specifications from the outset that gives really clear indication to clients around the cost of these items, which so often is very difficult to see within an overall build scheme, but also thinking about cleaning and maintenance and the ability to replace items. So, you know, some of the collections you see there are right for very high-end retirement living, right the way down to sheltered housing. The point is that with the right design thinking and products, you can get the right access and the right design look and feel. And my last point I wanted to make, and this will really connect with Shirley's presentation, but it's all well and good designing a scheme that's accessible at new build stage, but actually you'll find that a number of residents need adaptations for the duration of the scheme's life, but also obviously the duration of the resident's life. And currently a lot of residents obviously go to disabled facility grants for those adaptations, which can take an awful long time, but the DFG route can often put products into apartments that aren't necessarily exactly what is needed for a resident as they get older, but also the look and feel of those products will very much impact how someone responds to the home. So MotionSpot launched a sub-brand called Fine and Able, which is a full adaptation service for homeowners to look at making adaptations in their home. And we're absolutely delighted to have partnered with Shirley and the Extracare Charitable Trust to look at getting this off the ground in Solihull and hopefully rolling it out to a number of other schemes to make sure that residents can have the right adaptations as they get older. Thank you, and I'm going to hand back to Jeremy.
Ed, thanks ever so. That was a really whirlwind introduction, but you covered a lot there. And I see Sally has been posting quite a lot of information in the chat box, including some of your thought leadership around this. And thanks for your contribution and setting both the scene, but also a segue back to Shirley in a minute. But I'm also conscious, you know, we've got over 100 people joining us, many of whom have got some great experience. I know Sally's posted some blogs that Margaret's written for us, some work that Invisible Creations and other. So again, I do hope to generate some conversations with you all later on this afternoon. And thanks, Jean, for your question in the chat box. We'll come back to that. But without further ado, can I introduce Shirley Hall from the Extracare Charitable Trust. And Shirley, you're live in situ, so over to you.
Thanks very much, Jeremy. Yes, so I'm in our innovation apartment, which is also a bit confusing because it's actually in Solihull, so Shirley's in Shirley today. And I'm not going to walk around because I think it can be a bit confusing, but I'm just going to talk through what we've been doing, what we've been working on with Ed and MotionSpot. So hopefully I'm going to be able to move my slides. I had this problem last time actually, Jerome, that I couldn't move. That's it, lovely. Thank you. So great. Innovation within our apartment. So I've been with an Extracare for 8 years, and I think we've come a long way in those 8 years. But this is just a picture to show you a very traditional bedroom within one of our apartments. Looks lovely, and I think we'd very much focus on it looking lovely and the design, without really enough thought, bizarrely enough, about what we were designing and building for older people. Solihull. And we met Ed and the team at MotionSpot actually through one of the Housing Lynn workshops several years ago. And it's been incredibly helpful to help us come up with a design brief for this village. We were a little bit late to get it in all of the village, but we've been able to adapt one of our apartments, the 2-bed apartment that I'm sitting in, so that we can showcase it for residents that are moving in, current residents, other residents that might want to come and have a look from another village within Birmingham, but also the wider community as well. So we knew that we needed to upgrade the apartments, and we commissioned MotionSpot to work with us to develop that standard. And as Ed said, the important thing first of all was to say to our residents, what do you really love about the apartments? What works well, but what's really annoying? And our residents are really good, as we know, at telling us what are the things that really annoy them or that don't work well and that they would just like to have differently. So we set up an innovation design group across all of our departments within Extra Care. And we wanted to test it in our newest village in Solihull. Before, what we'd actually done is just to put a lot of smart technology in the apartment to show residents what they could have to make their life easier. But we hadn't done enough work on the kitchen and the bathroom. So we're learning, we've learned from the work we've done with Ed and the team, we're learning from our residents, and what we have now got within this apartment, we've got a digital screen on the wall in the hallway where we're actually going to put a form on for residents or anybody who visits to say, what did you like about this, what worked well, and give us your feedback, so we'll be able to take that learning with us as we go. So Ed's shown you some pictures already, but this is the new designed bathroom within the innovation apartment. And I think you'll agree that if you look at the shower there, the picture on the left, if you look at that grab rail, it doesn't look like a grab rail at all. There's a little plate at the back of the shower that's very easily adapted into a shower seat. So when we first did the apartment, we actually had the shower seat in place. We had a bit of a discussion of actually it did look a little bit like a care bathroom. So we've taken it off, but we've put the plate there to show people how it can be adapted. And the chrome grab rail at the side of the toilet. Again, we've learned from that because we've had to make changes to the infrastructure, to the wall. Our tiles used to come halfway, but if we're going to put a grab rail in, we need to make it easier for our residents to adapt an apartment in the future. So when we design the next village or another development within an existing village, we need to make sure that the infrastructure is there within the bathrooms. And as Ed said, you know, have the plates in place so that you can easily make those adaptations. Somebody put a question on the Q&A actually about space within the bathroom. And hopefully you can see now the picture on the right there is the new unit that we've got in the bathroom. It looks so much better than the picture that Ed showed before, which had 2 little cupboards at the bottom, which frankly just looked like it was from a school dorm, if you like. And I think you'll see from this unit, it looks different. There's a lot more space there. There's more cupboard space, there's more open space, there's much better lighting. The sink is at the right level as well for somebody that might be in a wheelchair, easily accessible. And we've actually put a mirror at the back that's got the illuminations behind it, but you can play music. So you could play messages or you can play from your Alexa. You could set up a timer if you wanted to. And it's got the date on it and it's got the weather on it and the time. Just simple little things to show residents what they can have in the apartments. This is one of the biggest changes. So this is a completely new kitchen. And one of the things I've been asking at Extra Care since I've been here is why can't we adapt our kitchens? You know, why can't we put in drop-down cupboards for residents who can't reach the top or have clear cupboards? And you'll see there the picture on the left, we've got a rise and fall hob. Again, that's to show residents who might be in a wheelchair that you can have that installed fairly easily if we make sure the infrastructure is in place. We've also got better lighting in the kitchen. We've got the pull-out cupboard that you see there. Before we had dead space and the residents would say to us, you know, complete waste of time. We know that, you know, storage is an issue, and yet you've got this corner cupboard that we can't access that's effectively cordoned off. So we've now put that corner cupboard, the pull-out display there that you can see. And if you can just see there, actually, the little red and white kettle doesn't look particularly great visually, but we've also got some assistive technology in there, some very simple aids. So that is just a kettle that somebody with arthritis who is struggling to lift can just tip that kettle up and pour out. So we've also got a mix of things like that in the kitchen and the apartment as well. And then we've got a range of smart technology devices. I'm not going to say the name because it'll set every voice-enabled assistant off in this apartment, but we've got several of those voice-enabled assistants set up in the bedroom, the kitchen and the bathroom. We've set up various commands as well. And if you can see there, the picture on the bottom left, we've put a bed sensor into the bedroom. And we've set that up so that if a resident was lying on the bed, and got up in the morning, got up off the bed, the electric blinds will automatically open, the lights can turn on or turn off, and then the smart coffee maker, which you can see there in the middle in the kitchen, will automatically start. So the time the resident has made their way into the kitchen, the coffee's ready. And then we've got things, smart plugs, again, very simple, that you can just link into the Wi-Fi system. Our residents said to us, you know, I'm always leaving things on, I'm leaving the iron on and going out of the apartment. So again, you can put a device there, a smart plug, so that will automatically come on, turn off. You can actually sit here and say to your voice-enabled assistant, turn the iron on or turn the iron off. So as I'm sitting here in the lounge, I can say various commands. I could open the door, I could put the kettle on, I could put the iron on and off, but I can also say close the blinds in the bedroom or in the second bedroom or in the lounge or the kitchen. Again, it's just thinking, it's just showing residents what they can put into the apartment that would make life easier. And then you can see the robot vacuum cleaner there. Again, when we were setting this apartment up on Monday, the cleaner came in, was really busy, and she sort of said, oh, what's that? And I said, it's the vacuum cleaner. Happy to put it on and do the vacuuming for you while you do other things if you like. And I said to her, come and have a look at these devices, because you're going around cleaning the village. Some of our residents might be using you to clean the apartments, and if you spot something that somebody's finding difficult in the apartment, you can tell them about these devices. So the aim of this apartment is not just to tell our residents, the local community around Solihull, but our staff as well, to get them to using these sorts of devices and understand how they can work and how they can work quite simply and be put into effect quite effectively and simply for residents. We wanted to make sure we give all of this information to residents. So all of this is on a screen, and this slide is just one of several that are on the screen in the hall. So it tells the residents what the different devices are. It tells them what it can do and how to activate it. And we also plan to have a smart market here where we'll put some of these devices out into the village on display for our residents to take away, test, use, pilot, come back and give us their feedback. Because often residents just don't understand what they can do. They might think that voice-enabled assistant is listening, is Big Brother, can be you know, quite obtrusive, and they are fearful about some of these smart devices. So I think it's really important we try and help them to have a better understanding. And so some of the commands that it says there, you know, helping them to understand what it can do. We've put all this together in a booklet that they can take away as well, so they can take away and have a read of it. But what we'd like them to do is discuss it with their family, with their relatives, with their friends. It may be that their family help them set up a lot of this. Again, I was having a conversation with someone yesterday saying that we talked about a business model for Extra Care where we might buy devices, install them and have a package, if you like, a business model for maintaining them. But at the moment, I think it's just quite complicated. But I think, you know, we know couriers and other companies do come in and install them. And so there certainly is a market for somebody to do that within Extra Care, I think, and, you know, sheltered accommodation, Extra Care at locations like ours. So it's very much been working in partnership. Having Ed and the team has been so helpful. So when we were trying to do things within Solihull, we probably took advantage a little bit. Ed, I must admit, is going back to you and saying, is this right? Would this work? You know, if we want to change our communal toilets, what should we do? And just having Ed there to talk about the height of the toilet, about the basins, about what people that are in wheelchairs or might have difficulties accessing the communal areas has been fantastic. And I didn't talk a little bit so much, Ed, about the kitchen and the bathrooms, but, you know, having that contrast between the cabinets, between the wall, between the floors, all those sorts of things, we will do a standard going forward. So that design brief we will use for our next village and for the next phase of one of our existing villages. So we have a lot of signage here in the apartment, in the bathroom with Fine and Able, because what we would like residents to do, this isn't in every apartment here at Solihull, but if a resident comes in and wants to make some of those adaptations, having been able to signpost them to Fine and Able so that you can actually, that company can come in and easily make those amends for them, takes the pressure off perhaps family, local authority, you know, where we've got the outright ownership or part ownership of apartments, they're able to do that far more easily. The other thing that's important is we always say to our residents, you can make any adaptations to your apartment, but what we would like you to do is to put them back to how it was if you move out, or if somebody moves on somewhere, you have to put them back to how the apartment was when they bought it. But actually, if you've got, you know, plates that you can put back on the bathroom so it doesn't look like you've got the shower seat or the grab rails, the drop down bars, etc. It's also much easier for them and their families, that there's not a lot of work to do, and it actually is better for somebody else moving in. It's future proofing, so we've got it all there if somebody's needs do change, and they're likely to change. We're all aging and our needs will change as we age, so it's much better for having the apartment ready for somebody who's got different needs. So signposting to smart tech and assisted technology, we're going to be working with some of our residents. We have resident IT volunteers. They're going to be helping us spread some of this information to our residents, and also have digital awareness sessions. Although we've got more older people moving in who have devices, smartphones, iPads, etc., and are more aware of what's going on, we also still have some residents that have never used anything. So we delivered a session at Lovat Fields, one of our villages, last week, and actually just ran through how to just use an iPad, you know, how to just turn it on, how to use it, and we'll be doing more of that across our villages. Having smart markets where we have some of the technology available for them to take away, test and pilot. But as I say, I think above all, it's about thinking about our future developments, taking all the learning and adaptations and having it in one design brief. I think what you said earlier, Ed, was really insightful, that somebody else new comes into the organisation and makes changes thinking it's for the better, but actually we've put these things in to help older people, so we're taking all of those lessons learned and making sure that we don't lose sight of that. Good example is we have a letterbox that means somebody can easily take the post out and doesn't have to bend down, and that was preventing a lot of falls. Then in the newer village, someone thought it looked a bit clunky and took them out, so we lost that. So we just want to make sure all of that learning and adaptations are in that one design brief, and we can use that for the future. And that's where I'll stop, Jeremy, and hand over back to you.
Shirley, thanks very much. And I know you wanted to do a tour as well of the apartment, but hopefully we can capture that another time. But that was really great. And one of the things I'm struck by is that I remember Libby and I think Libby's on the call as well. We visited a scheme, Red Bank in Bury, some years back. And what was interesting is that the assisted bathing features were really impressive. But what you've described is very much about how to make that much more personable in the individual accommodation, as opposed to having that sort of in the wider sense in terms of more community use. And I think let's come back to that, because I think you are really sort of trying to shift the goalposts about how we sort of provide more person-centered support to make it more independent living rather than something about dependency.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thanks ever so. And we're going to move on now to Yvonne and Millie from the Centre for Ageing Better, because while the improvements to our homes to create more contemporary and more lifestyle and attractive accommodation is really important, we also know that we have a number of properties across the UK whose condition is really poor. We have chronic disrepair, and there's a lot of work to be done around making those properties both accessible and adaptable. So without further ado, Yvonne, can I introduce you and your evidence partner, Millie? So over to you. Do unmute yourself.
Sorry, I'm still doing that after all of this time. Apologies for that. Just a huge thank you for the opportunity to share with you today some of the work we've been doing around the Good Home Inquiry. And really great to come alongside Ed and Shirley as well. And I think when we get to the end of the presentation, we'll hopefully draw some links back to what we've heard already. I'm going to just ask Millie to move on to the next slide and just say a little bit for those of you who don't know about the Centre for Ageing Better. Our vision is for a society where everyone enjoys a good later life. On this slide, we've just put some key bits of information about Ageing Better. But we work across 4 key areas: homes, healthy ageing, work and connected community. And we work across those areas because we know they are the areas that people approaching later life have told us are really important for them. And it comes through in our wider evidence. Today, Millie and I are going to talk to you about some of the findings from the research we've been doing as part of the Good Home Inquiry, but I just wanted to flag that we've done a considerable amount of work around how we can better meet the needs of our older adults through inclusive design of homes and our products. And we've got a webinar in July that we will we'll flag and put a link at the end of the presentation for those of you who might be interested in that. But a little bit more about the Good Home Inquiry. For those of you who joined the last webinar, you will have heard David Orr speak about the Good Home Inquiry, but very briefly, it was commissioned and is supported by the Centre for Ageing Better. And as you can see by the first bullet point, it's independently led by an extremely impressive panel. It was launched in July last year and it will run through to autumn this year. And we're very busy at the moment pulling everything together to help really start to shape and think through recommendations. I think it's really worth highlighting that the inquiry is unique in that it's focused on the 23 million homes that we have already, not the ones that we're about to build. Obviously, expanding our housing stock is really important, we all know that, but I'm always struck by the fact that at least 80% of the UK homes that will exist in 2050 have already been built. And we know, and we'll come on to say about how many of these aren't in the condition that they need to be. The Good Home Inquiry, can we just go back to the previous one? Just a little bit about what the inquiry involves. It involves looking at past and present housing policies. We've been doing a wide range of stakeholder engagement across 4 themes, which are health, connected, digital connectivity, finance and the environment. And we've been doing lots of research with people to really capture the lived experience. We'll say a bit more about that in a moment. The real aims of the inquiry are really about creating evidence-informed recommendations that will really help to improve our homes, making them safe, warm and accessible for people of all ages and abilities, and not just now but for in the future. So that adaptability over the life course is really important. And the inquiry will support, we hope, the Centre for Ageing Better goal that by 2030 more people aged 50 and over will live in homes that support them to live a healthy and fulfilling life. Now, you won't be surprised, can we have the next slide please, Millie? You won't be surprised by the drivers of the Good Home Inquiry and our wider work around homes that ageing better. And the bottom line is that around 10 million people in England are currently living in homes that present danger and endangers their health and their well-being. We have 4.2 million homes that fail to meet what are the basic minimum standards set by government, and that's the decent home standards. And we know that the older you are, as this slide shows, the more likely it is that you're going to live in a home that is classed as non-decent. We know that houses that are either damp, cold, inaccessible, or in physical disrepair can have serious effects on physical and mental health. We know that people every winter are dying because their homes are too cold. We know the extent to which falls are a major cause of death as people as they age. And we know that many people are living in homes that have trip hazards and seemingly little things that really affect the accessibility and usability of their homes, and ultimately prevent people from living an active, connected, independent and healthy life. And I think COVID's really brought that into focus for a lot of us, that we've really had to it's really been brought into our faces. We've had to think hard and had to think again and redefine the relationships that we have with our homes. And I think it's really helped to understand with greater clarity the challenges that our poor housing stock presents for so many people. And it's really demonstrated some of the housing related health inequalities as well. Could we have the next slide, please, Millie? I think we just talked about the impact on the individual. Obviously, the impacts are far-reaching for society, for the economy as a whole. I'm not going to go through this slide, but we'll be sharing it later. So there's some of the bigger picture strategic drivers as well for why do we need a good home inquiry. Could we have the next slide, please? Thanks. So just to give a quick whistle-stop tour of some of the research that we've been doing. As I've said, the research isn't the only thing that we've been doing as part of the Good Home Inquiry, but we've commissioned 5 key pieces of research. Started with the King's Fund Home and Health and COVID research last year, and that was focusing on the existing literature on the connection between homes and homes and health. We then commissioned Ipsos Mori, and Millie's going to talk about that more about that today, longitudinal research that was really exploring the experiences of living in poor quality homes. We've extended that research with a poll, but also some wider research with a NatSen panel homes and community study that is really looking at about changes during COVID in the first lockdown. We commissioned a fantastic piece of research from the UK Collaborative Centre for Housing Policy, where they've really looked at all of the existing housing policy and programmes that have been implemented over the past 50 or so years to address poor quality home housing. And based on the lessons learned from those policies and the evidence in place, what really started to explore what are going to be the most effective opportunities to address the poor quality of our current housing stock, given where we are now politically, economically and socially. And then we're just finishing what I think is one of the most exciting pieces of work that we've been doing as part of the inquiry, and that is some deliberative research with over 98 members of the public, really exploring the acceptability and the attractiveness of a range of different solutions to try and help improve the quality of our homes. I'll now hand over to Millie, who will just share with you some of the findings from some of that research.
So as Yvonne said, one of the second pieces of research to come out of the Good Home Inquiry was a piece of work by Ipsos Mori. 20 participants took part in the longitudinal research, looking at the issues in the home, but also barriers that people find addressing these issues. So as you can see, 3 themes really came across in the research. We've got warm and dry, which refers to ventilation, damp, mould, moving around the home, which really speaks to the theme of today. So about mobility issues, accessibility in the home, and then finally safe and secure at home. And this actually refers to not only the physical sense of feeling unsafe and secure in the home, but also links to tenure. So for example, renters not feeling secure in their tenure are therefore actually a lot of the time not asking for things such as adaptations because of this. Just to take you through quickly, warm and dry, majority of participants described how cold their homes were, and that was prevalent across all 10 years. But actually, when participants talked about the fact their homes were cold, it wasn't about how they felt the damp or mold affecting their health, but actually this feeling of shame and embarrassment that came with it. And therefore, there was a preference for short-term fixed over long-term solutions. Again, exacerbated by people living in the rented sector, unable to ask their landlords for help, or feeling unable, should I say. And then, as I said, again, safe and secure at home. This didn't talk about feeling unsafe as breaking in, for example, but actually just people living in rented sector not asking for adaptations that actually were discussed by colleagues earlier. So as I said, today, the thing that most links to the theme of this happy hour is moving around the home. So those with mobility issues were most vocal about their concerns of moving around the home safely, unsurprisingly, but actually all participants expressed significant stress and anxiety linked to a fear of injury in the home, and this was worse for people as they age as well. And linked to age, participants spoke of not seriously thinking about how the home would impact them as they age when they first moved in. So that's not just people were earlier about built-in accessibility and for the future, people weren't thinking of that. So their bathrooms weren't able to be adapted, or their kitchens. And concerns over safety and a desire for improved comfort levels were the main driving forces behind participants wanting to make adaptations to the home. And whilst I said those with mobility issues experienced just the worst, I think there was, as part of this research, we really got to know the participants, and there's just one quote that really has stuck with me throughout all of this work, and it was from a private renter who said her bathroom was so inaccessible to her that she was actually having to wash in her kitchen sink or travel to her family's home to shower. And this was obviously severely affecting her mental health. And she actually said that, in her words, "I deserve the right to wash free like anybody else. When you have to wash in the kitchen or rely on family members, why should I have to do that?" And I think that quote for me kind of summarises why we all do this work, because no person should have to live in a home where they can't do basic things such as wash. So moving on, as I said, we actually looked at the barriers people face when trying to make changes to their homes, whether that be repairs or adaptations. And unsurprisingly, the biggest factor was finances. So across all 10 years, finances were highlighted as the most significant barrier to making repairs and adaptations. However, this was particularly an issue for homeowners, as a lot of the time the payment obviously falls for them, and from social renters can rely on the local authority. So due to a lack of disposable income for many of the people within this research, most did not view changes as essential, and it was said about prioritising and not future-proofing. And therefore that meant actually the issues got worse, as you can imagine, and the result of that is the health effects got worse, negative effects on health, should I say. So grants and loans were viewed as critical to enable repairs and adaptations for later life. However, most participants were actually unaware of the existing grant and loan schemes available to them. So this is to say that actually a lot of the people involved in the research hadn't made changes to their home because they simply weren't aware of things such as DFG. I know DFG doesn't cover anything, but all local authorities have their own funding streams, and even privately is becoming more common these days. But participants emphasised that financial support should be readily available to help people make their homes safer, and especially in old age, one of the issues was, and another good quote, let people upgrade their homes without making them go bankrupt when they get older. Okay, so moving on, Yvonne briefly mentioned about the deliberative work that we have done at Ageing Better. This is the final output of the Good Home Inquiry. And the purpose of this was to bring everything together, all the barriers, all the issues we've discussed, looking at the health effects and actually thinking what are the solutions, but involving the public in the development of the solutions and not just relying on research by academics or people such as ourselves. We really want to ensure that the solutions we propose as part of the Good Home Inquiry are supported and developed by the public and the people who are going to be using them. So as part of this, we had 96 participants from across all 10 years across England, and that's a really big group, loads of events. It was quite a big task in itself. There were 3 sessions, and the first one of this was aspirations of the home, so talking about what people want of their home as they age and how it might. And secondly, the role of technology. Sherry talked a lot about earlier, sustainability and health, improving the quality of our homes, and then finally exploring the options for improving the quality of the homes. So the final ones talked about solutions developed throughout the series of workshops. So within the first session, is probably that most speak to this today, aspirations of the home. The themes here were space, safety, beneficial to your health, this should be built for the future, easy to maintain and energy efficient. And all of these do speak to each other, but the participants felt that actually they need to be discussed separately to ensure that all were included. As we know, space and safety is key to beneficial to your health and also built for the future. So with the deliberative events, actually, we're still waiting on the final reporting, and these are kind of just some headline emerging findings. But what I kind of wanted to say is that I really encourage people to follow the Good Home Inquiry, because actually we're going to be reporting on the potential solutions, so policy, in the next month, and therefore in September, as Yvonne said, we will be making our final recommendations, which will be based on what I discussed with you today and so much more if I'd have had the time to discuss. But yeah, I really encourage you to kind of follow us in our journey. But I'm just going to hand back to Yvonne now.
So I'm mindful of time, and I think just with the clock ticking, just really sort of flag that I think there's such richness of insights into both the problems and the solutions to improve the quality of homes that comes through in all of the research that we've done. Not enough time to talk about it here, but I think our learning really draws out the diversity of experience that people have. And also the diversity of their needs and preferences for improving their homes and living independently and adapting their homes. The solutions to addressing the challenges of improving homes involves a role for the central government, for the public, the private sector and the voluntary sector, but there's also a really key role for individuals too, for us, as our various as people who live in homes and own or rent. So the solutions really to improving the quality of our homes really need to think about and have the intention of educating and sparking behavioural change at the earliest point to really help to prompt action amongst and acceptability amongst individuals. We know from our research that most individuals do not want to either accept the need for adaptations or accept that their homes are in need of repair, or want to come face to face and think about the fact that they are aging, and some of the things they couldn't do they're now unable to do. I think we know that very clearly that the decisions about home improvements wraps up in individual, household and wider family circumstances, beliefs and attitudes and identity came through really strongly in all of the work that we've done. And I think what we've heard today from Ed and Shirley really starts to point the way of how do you actually start to prompt people and start to get that behavioural change that's needed. That there's a lot of stigma around some of the adaptability products and inclusive design when it comes to homes, but I think it doesn't need to. I think what we've heard today and what we've seen today really highlights that it really doesn't need to be like that, and I think they're really exciting opportunities to really get that shift that we need at an individual level as well as at a societal level. So I'll end there, and that is the plug for our seminar webinar in July.
Yeah, and thanks, Jerome, for posting that. I do encourage people to attend that. I certainly attended one of your stakeholder events a couple of weeks ago. And what I was struck, in fact, this may follow on quite neatly from your presentation, was also is the tenure diversity of the people you were engaging with. So it wasn't just residents and tenants or owner-occupiers, it was also a large number of people in private tenancies as well. And I'm just wondering whether you had any insights from their experiences that you could share a little bit more about.
Millie, do you want to go or shall I go?
I think, unsurprisingly, for private renters, their experiences are very much determined by their landlords, and that's kind of, it was very much a feeling of helplessness with renters, and actually, unfortunately, and unsurprisingly again, the solutions are far more complex in terms of, because I know we already have government initiatives in place to kind of supposed to look at the quality of private rented sector, but actually those haven't proven to be very successful at this point. And that's why actually with the discussions with rentals, actually more looking at regulation within the deliberative events, and we will be reporting that. But of course the solutions are very different. But it's, yeah, regulation, I think, with renters, and actually how do we address that is another issue in itself.
Yeah, I know it's a whole other agenda, but I was struck by people who themselves were renting privately and sharing how difficult it was for them to persuade their landlord to make significant improvements, and also some of the difficulties around environmental health, access to DFGs, and some of the points that Yvonne also raised. So thanks for saying that will come through in the final report and other sort of distribution mechanisms. There have been a couple of questions posted in the Q&A, which have been mainly for Ed and Shirley, and I believe that Ed has probably answered a couple of them. I know there was one earlier on from Jean and another one from Barbara. Ed, Shirley, do you want to just capture any of the sort of responses that you've shared on the system first? And I know that we've had a couple of other queries in from Bob and an anonymous attendee as well. So do you want to deal with the ones you've already responded to first?
Yeah, sure. So we were asked a question from Barbara about, have you ever come across a scheme where the support or design of the building was not able to support your recommended adaptations? And I've just posted a response in the chat on this, but just to explain it, yes is the short answer. So unfortunately, many of our schemes across the UK have been built without the necessary wall reinforcement to take future provisions of grab rails and shower seats in particular, as well as a lot of the kitchens that have been installed haven't been planned for corner carousels to bring contents out towards you, or drop down baskets in overhead cabinets. There are solutions to that. So I would challenge anyone who says we can't do something within an existing fabric of a building, because just very recently we've had to remove some tiles on an extra care scheme, put patching in behind 4 tiles, retile that area to then put grab rails and shower seats. The same with just replacing a kitchen cabinet. So there are options to that. And then just a question around storage. Storage always comes up often in bathrooms because there's never enough space in bathrooms. Margaret Edwards from the Lynn has answered just around avoiding vanity units under basins, which I'd very much support. Vanity units are not good for wheelchair users, but anyone perching at the basin. And the most important areas of storage in the bathroom to think about are next to the toilet in particular. So having some sort of small wall-mounted storage unit next to the toilet would be our suggestion. Looking at drawers as opposed to cupboards, again, is a good sort of design principle. But as Shirley mentioned and showed you in the images, you can have some really beautiful joinery around basins to still give access underneath the basin and provide more storage. You could have mirror cabinets that provide storage, as well as thinking about simple things like shower baskets that are often a bit of an afterthought on schemes. So those were the questions.
Thanks for that. Shirley, do you have any other comments? Because again, there's sort of points that you may have sort of explored as your part of your learning from the Trust as well.
Yeah, just to add to what Ed was saying there, that unit, we've had designed and built specifically to the Motion Spot accessible design standard. So I sent that to their first design. I sent to Ed and the team, and they said, you know, the basin isn't the right height, the mirror needs to be a certain size, you need a lot more space, you need more cupboards, you need doors. So we've now got that, and that's what we will put in our new development. Obviously price is important, but if I was buying one of these apartments, I need loads of storage, I've got loads of stuff to go in the bathroom, and I suspect, you know, a lot of us have. So it's really important, and that's the sort of thing that, you know, I would absolutely want to have as a must. And as Ed said, you know, for us, it's about learning to make sure the infrastructure's there, the right thickness of the walls, to ensure that our residents can easily put grab rails in the future, because they haven't been able to in the past, which is, you know, it's hard to believe, isn't it? We've been designing and building these big retirement homes for older people for years and years and years, and yet we've not been able to make these things easily, you know, available or to retrofit. So going forward, I think, you know, it's going to be in a much better place for anybody buying an apartment or moving in.
And I mean, the point you make there about the price points is something that's also raised in one of the anonymous queries, which is around, you know, how can we enable this to be accessible to people or organisations on lower incomes as well? Now, as an organisation, Shirley, you operate right across the spectrum. So any thoughts about how to make this perhaps inclusive as opposed to exclusive?
Yeah, and so for us, it's, you know, where can we make other savings, but how can we have this in all apartments? So that's design there of the bathroom, the new unit. If we're building a 260 bed retirement village, and we've got a cost for 260 of them, of course it brings it down, so it makes it more affordable. And we actually don't think it's going to change the cost of the apartments a great deal. Same with the kitchens. You know, once we know what we want, we've changed the specification. Our kitchen used to be around 2 walls, and there used to be the door and a wall with nothing on. But even in this kitchen here, having it on 3 walls doesn't make it look smaller. And in terms of cost, it's not actually going to be a lot different. So I guess for us, it's easier to do if we're buying at scale and building, you know, big apartments like this. But yeah, it's just thinking about future proofing for people of the future, for older people.
I suppose part of that for other organisations, how to build this in, and Ed, you probably will support this, how you build this into your asset management strategies and your, not just your repairs and cyclical maintenance, but also to think long term about that future proofing.
Absolutely, and just to support Shirley's view. So some anonymous attendee asked me, are these bathrooms accessible for people on lower incomes? Shirley and Extra Care Charitable Trust are demonstrating that, because they've obviously got a proportion of private sales, shared ownership and social rent. So people on lower incomes are receiving these bathrooms. What I would say is, you know, what we're trying to do is change perceptions that actually, you know, these products have to cost money. As Jeremy says, if you plan them at the early enough stage as part of your refurbishment program, they don't have to cost more money. By putting more volumes through, as Shirley said, will help bring the price down on these adaptations anyway. And an important thing to stress is, you know, a business like ours, it does both design consultancy for clients like Shirley, but also we supply product packages for, you know, a later living scheme at 5-star right the way down to sheltered housing. And we've demonstrated that we can actually just supply product rather than the design advice around that, and hit a price point that will work for people on lower incomes.
Thanks, Ed. And the beauty about the Housing Link membership is we have such a broad church, and I'm so pleased that Jaquel and Marnie are with us this afternoon. And you'll see that Jaquel has highlighted a report by the National Residential Landlords Association on their work around private tenancies and adaptations, and then from a more technical and legal perspective, highlighting issues around employers' requirements to provide sufficient wall strengthening. So that's a really interesting point. I don't know if either of you want to come back on that before I go to Bob and Sandy's question.
If Jaquel and Marnie have commented on it, I can't quite see the comments on my screen, but I'd very much, having worked with them, chat box, yeah. Okay, having worked with them closely, I'd support what they put up here. Yeah, give me a minute on that, and I'll have a look.
Yeah, well, again, we work very closely with the college votees, and Marnie and Jaquel have been very supportive in some of the pages we've written on the LIN website. Bob highlights another issue, which is around not just about individual apartments, but are there improvements that can be suggested for communal and shared areas to make them, and what he calls it, less clinical. Shirley, can I come to you first on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've changed our communal toilets. We actually put a smart toilet in, but a real learning for us, because Ed and the team did a design and we thought we could do it slightly differently, and it didn't quite end up how we wanted it to. But we've got the learning there for our future developments. But, you know, things like Ed and the team came into the dining area and talked about tables, you know, those small round tables that a resident could lean on and easily tip over. So just thinking about the spacing of them, the size, the shape. We'd also things like the carpets, you know, the contrast, loads and loads of learning that we've got for our future developments that absolutely don't make it look clinical at all. Really simple things that can make a difference. So, you know, when you walk into a room, we used to have an area that was really shiny that could have looked like water for somebody who'd got a cognitive impairment. So they're all the sorts of things that we're putting into our future design. Corridor size as well, handrails, contrast colours, all of those things that aren't so much money, but just making sure that you do them from the beginning to get them right.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Dan. I think the last Housing Lynn in-person regional event actually took place in Filton and Bristol at one of your new developments there, and that point around how you were working closely to minimise glare, for example, for people with a sight or a cognitive impairment, really important. Sorry, Ed, I think I may have just interrupted you.
No problem. And Shelley's mentioned a lot of the principles in communal areas. The only other two areas I'd highlight are think about what your welcome area is when you go into a scheme. Think about the design of that experience when someone walks through the doors and gets to that main reception area. Again, often there's very little it's often an afterthought, the design of that reception, and that can certainly make a scheme feel less clinical by really thinking about the design of the welcome and reception area. The other point I'd make is around think about flexibility of space, and we're seeing this as a design principle running through a lot of new schemes now, in that don't think about, you know, walls being fixed in communal areas, because how residents and staff use those spaces will change given the time of day, the season, a whole number of different factors. So having real flexibility of use of space in communal areas would be a recommendation.
Okay, we're drawing to a close, but there is one question from Sandy, and I wanted to go back to Yvonne and Millie, if I may, because this issue around heating, cold, and I think you reported earlier in your presentation around the work you've done with the King's Fund. We also have Alan Lewis from Manchester University on the call, who I know has done a lot of work around thermal comfort and the building management systems for health inequalities caused by poor heat. Are there any things that are coming through from the Good Home Inquiry around this? So Sandy particularly mentioned storage heaters, but are there other aspects, home insulation, energy efficiency and the like, that you could draw attention to?
So we are, there will be some recommendations around efficiency and linking to the environment as well, drawing on those factors. But I think there's also, I mean, some of the work that we have been doing that we're just starting to draw out now are looking at sort of looking at what are the solutions to help understand some of the challenges around actually what are the actual sort of problems. How can we start to identify what's wrong at a much more granular level than knowing that some homes are cold. So just thinking about some examples that some local authorities are leading now with a number of organisations about thinking about how do they, what's the smart technology, what are the ways for really capturing that data to really understand what just some of the aspects of the home, whether it's cold, how that's changing, etc., with the view that before some of the issues become really significant ones, you can take a much more preventative approach, and also really helping to really understand what is the housing stock, what is the quality of the housing stock at a really local and micro level.
Yes, and Millie, any final thoughts from you?
No, I agree with that. I think a lot of we're thinking about in terms of fuel poverty interventions, talking about with the environment, as we know, a lot of policies linked to stuff like fuel poverty to do with the environment. So kind of thinking about solutions and also thinking about encouraging people to take up those opportunities, whereas, you know, the government really like to promote their green ways to solve issues like that. However, actually public take-up's very low. So the Good Home Inquiry will look at how we can increase that and kind of encourage people to look at their home, not only in terms of heat, but actually how we can use environmental resources to overcome that problem.
Well, on behalf of the Housing Link, can I thank you all for your wonderful and excellent contributions, a really thought-provoking, insightful, informative session as always. For those of you who have joined the Happy Hours for the first time, this is the type of style that we try in Gender. We're just finalising our July programme. Our first session will be on the 6th of July, where we're looking specifically around supported living and particularly around the housing needs and aspirations of adults with learning disability or autism. I'm sure some of the work that you've heard today will also not just apply for older adults, but across for people of all ages and abilities. And then we'll be looking a little bit more in detail around compassionate neighbourhoods, thinking more around end-of-life care and supporting people towards the end of life at home, and some of the work that's been done in London and other parts of the country. And then coming back to design, we're looking more around intergenerational housing and some of the work of the Innovate UK that's doing with architects such as Levitt Bernstein and others around sort of creating intergenerational communities. So do check our website and follow our various social media tweets and newsletters to keep up to date on our active programme of Happy Hours. Can I all wish you a really good evening? I'm afraid I can't personally drop a drink by to thank our speakers for your sessions, but I look forward to engaging with you in person at a later date when lockdown is lifted. But on behalf of the Housing Link and the team behind the scenes, thanks everybody, and we'll see you at the next one.
Thanks, Jeremy.